The first night Daniel left for Vancouver, the house felt unfamiliar, as if it had quietly shifted the moment the front door closed behind him that morning. Emma had driven back from the airport with steady hands and a brave face, telling herself that 3 months was only a season, that winter would pass and spring would come just the same. But when she stepped inside their Portland home that evening, the silence met her at the door like an uninvited guest. The living room looked the same. The gray couch, the oak coffee table Daniel had built himself, the framed wedding photo above the fireplace. But without his quiet humming, without the sound of his keys landing in the bowl by the door, everything felt paused. She set her purse down and stood still for a long moment, listening. No footsteps, no shower running upstairs, no low voice calling her name, only the soft ticking of the clock and the distant rush of cars on wet pavement outside. She moved through the house slowly, touching small pieces of him as she passed, the flannel jacket hanging on the chair, the half-read novel on his nightstand, the travel-sized toothpaste he had forgotten to pack. In the kitchen, his coffee mug rested in the sink with a faint ring at the bottom. She reached for it, then stopped, her fingers hovering in the air as if washing it would erase the last trace of his presence. Instead, she turned away and opened the fridge, though she wasn't hungry. The light spilled over neatly stacked containers from the dinner she had prepared the night before, a meal they had barely eaten because neither of them had much appetite. She closed the fridge and leaned back against it, exhaling slowly, telling herself not to cry. Emma had always believed she was strong. She worked at the local library, managed her own schedule, paid bills on time, ran 3 miles every Saturday morning. She wasn't someone who depended on another person to feel complete. Yet as evening settled in and shadows stretched across the floor, she realized strength and companionship were not opposites. Daniel had been woven into her daily rhythm in ways she had never noticed before. His good morning kiss, his habit of texting her bad puns during lunch, the way he rested his hand at the small of her back when they crossed the street. Those gestures had seemed small, almost ordinary. Now they felt essential. She tried to distract herself by turning on the television, but the laughter from a sitcom sounded forced in the quiet room. She muted it. She tried reading, but the words blurred together because her mind kept replaying the image of him walking toward airport security, turning back one last time to wave. 3 months will fly, he had said with that confident smile. She had nodded, refusing to let him see her fear. Back then, the departure gate had been bright and busy, full of announcements and rolling suitcases. Now the memory echoed in the stillness of her living room. Rain began tapping against the windows, soft at first, then steady, wrapping the house in a gentle gray curtain. Emma walked upstairs and changed into one of Daniel's old college sweatshirts, breathing in the faint scent of his cologne that still lingered in the fabric. She sat on the edge of their bed, staring at the neatly made sheets. The bed looked too large. She pulled back the covers and slipped in, instinctively turning toward his side. Her hand reached across the mattress, expecting warmth, finding only cool cotton. The absence startled her more than she expected. She lay on her back, staring at the ceiling, counting the small cracks in the paint as if they could anchor her thoughts. She told herself this was temporary. Couples did this all the time. Work trips, military deployments, business travel. People survived distance. Love did not disappear because of miles. Yet knowing that did not quiet the ache settling in her chest. The house creaked as it adjusted to the night air, and each sound felt louder without Daniel's steady breathing beside her. She turned onto her side again and pulled his pillow closer, hugging it lightly, embarrassed by her own need but unable to stop. Her phone lit up on the nightstand with a message. For a brief, hopeful second, she thought it might be him, saying his flight had been delayed and he was coming home. But it was only a promotional email. She sighed and finally checked their earlier texts instead. His last message read, "Boarding now. Love you more than the miles between us." She traced the words with her thumb. Tears slipped down quietly, not dramatic, just honest. She wasn't afraid he would forget her. She wasn't worried about their marriage. What frightened her was the long stretch of ordinary days ahead without his physical presence, without the simple comfort of knowing he was in the next room. Loneliness did not crash into her like a storm. It crept in like the rain outside, steady and patient. It sat at the edge of her bed and whispered that 3 months was a long time to eat dinner alone, a long time to wake up without morning kisses, a long time to carry groceries by herself. She closed her eyes, trying to pray, trying to focus on gratitude instead of absence. She reminded herself why he had taken the assignment in Vancouver, the promotion, the raise, the future they were building together. This separation had a purpose. Still, purpose did not warm the empty side of the bed. After a while, exhaustion pulled at her, but sleep would not come easily. Every time she drifted off, she woke again, reaching for him. Around midnight, her phone buzzed softly. This time, it was Daniel. Landed safe. Already missing you, the message read. A small smile touched her lips through the tears. She typed back quickly, telling him she loved him, telling him the house felt strange without him, but she was okay. She didn't want him worrying. As she set the phone down, she realized something important. Love was not only about the big moments like weddings and anniversaries. It was about surviving the quiet nights too. The clock moved past 1 in the morning. The rain continued its steady rhythm. Emma finally allowed her body to relax, whispering his name into the dark as if he could hear it across state lines. The house remained silent, but her heart held both ache and devotion at the same time. Loneliness had knocked gently that first night, testing the door, reminding her how deeply she loved the man who was temporarily gone. And as she drifted into a light, fragile sleep, Emma understood that the coming months would not only test her patience, they would reveal the true weight of absence and the quiet strength of a heart learning to wait. 2 weeks after Daniel left for Vancouver, Emma had settled into a routine that looked stable from the outside but felt fragile underneath, and each day moved quickly yet ended too slowly. She woke early, made her side of the bed neatly, brewed coffee for one, and drove to the library where she smiled at visitors and recommended novels about adventure and romance as if her own life were not paused in quiet waiting. And though she told everyone she was doing fine, the evening still stretched wide and empty, especially around 6 o'clock when she noticed the neighbor across the street walking his golden retriever with steady steps and relaxed shoulders. A simple sight that became strangely comforting because it marked time. And one afternoon when she struggled to lift a heavy box of donated books from her trunk, the same neighbor crossed the street without hesitation and offered help with an easy smile, introducing himself as Ryan. His voice calm and friendly, not curious in a way that felt intrusive, just kind. And Emma thanked him, brushing her hair from her face and explaining that her husband usually handled the heavy lifting but was away for work in Canada. And when Ryan said, "That's a long stretch," with a tone that held understanding rather than pity, something inside her softened because he did not treat her like someone abandoned, only someone temporarily alone. And after that small meeting, their conversations began naturally. Brief exchanges at the mailbox, a wave from across the street, a quick chat about the unpredictable Oregon rain, and Emma found herself looking forward to those simple moments more than she expected. Not because she was searching for attention, but because it felt good to be seen at the end of the day by another adult who understood quiet neighborhoods and long evenings. One Saturday, he knocked on her door holding a plate of blueberry muffins, explaining he had baked too many and did not want them to go to waste, and she hesitated only a second before inviting him to stand under the porch light while they talked about favorite books and childhood summers, keeping the screen door between them as a soft boundary that felt proper and safe. Yet even within that distance, she felt warmth spreading through her chest when she laughed at one of his stories about trying to train his overly energetic dog. And she realized she had not laughed like that since Daniel left. Not the polite chuckle she gave coworkers, but a real laugh that made her shoulders relax. Days moved faster after that, filled with small interactions that seemed harmless. Ryan asking about her work at the library, Emma asking about his job in graphic design, both discovering they shared a love for old vinyl records, and rainy road trips along the coast. And she told herself that friendship was not betrayal, that talking to a neighbor did not mean she loved her husband any less. Yet one evening as they stood at the edge of her driveway, watching the sky turn soft pink and gold, A quiet pause settled between them. Not awkward, not forced, just charged with awareness. And Emma felt a flicker of something she did not want to name. Not exactly attraction to Ryan as a person, but a longing for closeness, for conversation that lasted past sunset, for someone physically present in the space where Daniel's absence echoed. Ryan never crossed a line, never spoke in a way that disrespected her marriage, but his steady attention filled a space she had tried to ignore, and that was what unsettled her most, because loneliness can disguise itself as connection. And Emma began to understand that what she was responding to was not romance but relief. Relief from the heavy quiet that waited for her inside the house each night. And still she caught herself checking the window around 6 to see if he was walking his dog. Caught herself choosing sweaters she felt confident in before stepping out to get the mail. Small signs that her heart was craving reassurance that she was still interesting, still noticed, still alive in someone's daily rhythm. When Daniel called from Vancouver, excited about progress at work and new colleagues, she listened with pride and love. Yet she did not mention how often she spoke to Ryan, not because she planned to hide anything serious, but because she sensed how easily innocent details could sound different across distance. And after each call, she felt both grateful for her husband's trust and slightly guilty for the comfort she found in another man's company, though nothing inappropriate had happened. And one chilly evening when Ryan offered to help fix a loose porch step, kneeling with a toolbox while she held a flashlight, their shoulders nearly brushing in the dim light, Emma became sharply aware of how close he was, how simple it would be to lean a little nearer, to let conversation turn softer. And that awareness startled her, because she loved Daniel deeply. Yet love does not erase human need for presence. And in that moment, she recognized that the real struggle was not about Ryan at all, but about the empty spaces inside her the distance had opened. As weeks moved forward, Emma found herself standing at a quiet emotional crossroad, appreciating Ryan's kindness while reminding herself where her heart truly belonged. And though nothing dramatic had occurred, though every interaction remained respectful and decent, the emotional tension grew in small, silent ways, like a low hum beneath normal conversation. And one evening as the sun dipped low and their talk slowed into a thoughtful silence, Emma sensed how easily comfort could shift into something more complicated if she was not careful, and that realization tightened her chest because she never wanted a temporary loneliness to threaten a permanent love. Yet she also could not deny that for the first time since Daniel's departure, she did not feel completely alone when darkness settled over the street, and that simple truth both warmed and frightened her at the same time. The night the power went out, the air already felt heavy with unspoken thoughts, and Emma sensed from the moment the lights flickered that something inside her would be tested. Rain pressed hard against the windows, wind bending the trees outside, and when the house fell into sudden darkness, the silence felt deeper than usual, almost personal, as if the world had narrowed to her breathing in the storm. And though she told herself she could handle one evening alone without electricity, the truth was that the shadows made everything she had been trying to manage feel closer. So she lit a few candles in the living room, their soft glow stretching across the walls, and stood still for a long second before picking up her phone, her thumb hovering over Ryan's name longer than necessary, because texting him was simple and innocent. Yet she knew the comfort she wanted was not really about flashlights or weather updates. It was about not sitting alone with her thoughts. She typed a quick message asking if his power was out too, and when his reply came almost instantly, light and friendly, offering company and a joke about surviving the storm, she felt both relief and a quiet warning in her chest. But relief won, and she told him he could come over, promising herself it was just neighborly kindness. When he arrived, damp from the rain, shaking water from his jacket, and smiling in that easy way that had become familiar, the house felt warmer despite the darkness, and they settled on opposite ends of the couch at first, candles between them on the coffee table, talking about simple things, the worst storms from childhood, camping trips gone wrong, how strange it was to live in a world so dependent on electricity. And Emma laughed more freely than she had all week, her guard lowering in the soft light, because nothing about the moment looked wrong, nothing sounded inappropriate, yet underneath the calm surface her heart moved quickly, aware of the closeness, aware that the storm outside seemed to push them into a smaller, more intimate space. As the conversation shifted, It grew more personal without either of them planning it. Ryan admitting that he had once moved across the country after a breakup just to start over. Emma sharing how hard the quiet nights had been since Daniel left, her voice softer than she intended, and when Ryan listened without interrupting, his eyes steady and understanding, she felt seen in a way that both comforted and unsettled her, because vulnerability creates connection, and connection, even innocent, can blur lines if left unchecked. The thunder rolled overhead, the candles flickered, and at some point the space between them shrank, not dramatically, just gradually, as if gravity itself was pulling them closer, their shoulders now only inches apart, their knees almost touching, and when Ryan reached to adjust one of the candles and his hand brushed hers, the contact lasted only a second but sent a clear signal through her body. Not desire in a reckless sense, but awareness, sharp and undeniable, and she realized how easy it would be in this dim room, with rain masking the outside world, to lean into comfort instead of stepping back. Ryan looked at her then, not boldly, not aggressively, just searching her expression as if asking a silent question, and Emma felt the weight of choice settle on her shoulders, because she knew he respected her marriage, yet she also knew that human hearts can drift when given permission, and for a fragile moment she imagined what it would feel like to forget responsibility and simply answer the loneliness that had been knocking for weeks, to let someone else's presence fill the empty spaces Daniel had left behind. But almost immediately another image rose stronger in her mind. Daniel at the airport, holding her hands, promising to call every night, trusting her completely without hesitation, and that memory cut through the haze like a clear light. Her breath caught, and she stood up quickly, creating physical distance before emotional distance could fail her, her voice steady but quiet, as she said she could not let the evening become something it should not, and Ryan did not argue or act offended. He nodded with understanding, stepping back as well, his expression gentle, admitting he never meant to complicate things. And in that calm exchange, Emma felt both relief and sadness. Relief that the line had not been crossed, sadness that loneliness had pushed her so close to it. They spoke only a few more minutes after that, the conversation returning to neutral topics before he thanked her for the company and stepped back out into the rain, leaving her alone again in the candlelit room. Yet this time the solitude felt different, not crushing but clarifying, because she understood now that the real struggle was internal, not external. And as she closed the door and leaned against it, listening to the storm, she realized that temptation does not always look dramatic or dangerous. Sometimes it looks like warmth during a blackout, like someone offering to sit beside you when you feel forgotten. And she allowed herself to feel the full weight of what almost happened without shame but with honesty, acknowledging that she had been searching for relief instead of strength. When the power returned minutes later, lights flooding the room suddenly and brightly, she blinked against the change, almost startled by how ordinary everything looked again. The couch, the table, the steady walls, and she blew out the candles one by one, watching thin trails of smoke rise and disappear, thinking about how quickly moments can shift direction. And she picked up her phone, scrolling to Daniel's name, hesitating only briefly before calling him, not out of guilt but out of clarity, needing to hear his voice, and when he answered, sounding tired yet happy to hear from her, telling her about his long day and the rainy Vancouver streets. She listened carefully, smiling softly, grounding herself in the steady rhythm of his words, and as they spoke, she felt something settle firmly inside her, a renewed decision rather than a forced obligation. Understanding that love is not only about feelings when someone is present, but about choices when they are not. And after they hung up, she went upstairs, lay down in the quiet bedroom, and stared at the ceiling again. But this time, the empty side of the bed did not feel like an invitation to drift. It felt like a space she was protecting, a promise she was keeping. And though loneliness still existed, it no longer held the same power, because she had faced it directly in the candlelight and chosen differently. And as the storm moved farther away and the night grew calm, Emma closed her eyes knowing that the hardest part was not missing her husband. It was guarding her heart while she did. And tonight she had done exactly that. The final month of Daniel's assignment moved with a different rhythm. Not because the days were easier, but because Emma carried herself differently after the stormy night that had forced her to look honestly at her own heart. And instead of counting the hours until his return with restless energy, she began filling her time with purpose, joining a small evening book club at the library, repainting the hallway in a soft, warm color they had once talked about choosing together, organizing old photo albums that reminded her of road trips along the Oregon coast and snowy visits to her parents in Idaho, and each small action felt like a quiet declaration that their life was still strong even across distance. She and Ryan returned to being polite neighbors, friendly but careful, their conversations brief and respectful, a wave across the street, a short exchange about the weather, nothing that lingered, and Emma felt grateful for the boundary that now stood clear between them, not built from fear, but from understanding, because she had learned that kindness does not require closeness and attention does not equal love. Daniel called every night when he could, sometimes tired, sometimes excited about a new client or progress at work, and Emma listened with genuine interest, sharing stories of her own days, the funny comments from library visitors, the way the neighborhood trees were beginning to change color, and their conversations grew deeper in a surprising way, more intentional, as if the miles between them forced each word to carry more meaning. And when Daniel admitted one evening that he had worried about leaving her alone for so long, she answered honestly that it had been hard, but it had also shown her how much their partnership mattered, and he grew quiet for a second before telling her he loved her more than any promotion, more than any city skyline, and that simple statement stayed with her. As his return date approached, Emma cleaned the house with fresh energy, not because it was messy, but because she wanted the space to feel welcoming. She washed the sheets, placed new flowers in a vase on the kitchen table, stocked the fridge with his favorite orange juice and the ingredients for the pasta dish he always requested after traveling. And on the morning of his flight home, she woke before dawn, nerves fluttering in her stomach like it was their first date all over again, and she chose a simple blue dress. He once said made her eyes brighter, brushing her hair carefully and checking the time more than necessary before driving to the airport. The arrivals terminal buzzed with movement, families waiting with balloons, business travelers pulling suitcases, children running toward open arms, and Emma stood still among them, her heart pounding as she scanned each face coming through the security doors. And then she saw him, a little tired, a little thinner, but unmistakably Daniel, his eyes searching until they locked with hers, and in that instant, the weeks of quiet dinners and empty nights melted away, replaced by a rush of relief so strong she almost laughed and cried at the same time. And when he reached her, she stepped forward without hesitation, wrapping her arms around him tightly, feeling the solid warmth of his body, the familiar scent of his cologne, the steady beat of his heart against her cheek, and he held her just as firmly, whispering that he had counted every day. The drive home felt lighter than any drive in months, filled with quick stories and overlapping sentences, both of them eager to share everything at once. And when they pulled into the driveway, Daniel paused for a moment, looking at the house as if seeing it with fresh eyes, thanking her for holding things together while he was gone. And Emma shook her head gently, telling him they had held it together because distance had not broken them. It had stretched them and proved their strength. That evening they sat on the porch as the sun dipped low, much like the evenings when she once stood there talking to Ryan. But now the air felt clear, uncomplicated, and Daniel rested his arm around her shoulders in a natural, easy way, asking quietly if the months had been lonely. And Emma took a slow breath before answering truthfully that yes, there were nights when the silence felt heavy, moments when she missed him so much it surprised her. But she also explained that the time apart had reminded her that love is not automatic. It is chosen daily, especially when it would be easier to drift toward comfort. And Daniel listened closely, squeezing her hand, not demanding details, not questioning her loyalty, simply trusting the woman he married. Inside the house later, as they unpacked his suitcase and laughed over small gifts he had brought back from Vancouver, Emma realized how different she felt compared to the first night he left, because loneliness no longer felt like an enemy waiting at the door. It felt like a lesson she had faced and understood. And as they prepared for bed, she noticed how natural it felt to share the space again. the bathroom counter crowded with both their things, the sound of him brushing his teeth, the soft creak of the mattress as he lay down beside her. And when the lights went off and darkness settled around them, it no longer felt wide and empty, but close and warm. Daniel reached for her hand under the covers, intertwining his fingers with hers in a simple, steady gesture that said more than words, and Emma turned toward him, resting her head on his shoulder, grateful not only for his return, but for the clarity that had grown inside her during his absence, because she understood now that love is strongest, not when it is easy, but when it is protected. And as sleep slowly pulled them both into quiet rest, the house no longer felt too large or too silent. It felt whole again, filled with shared breathing and shared dreams. And Emma knew that if distance ever came knocking in the future, she would remember the season not as a time of weakness, but as proof that her heart, though tested, had remained exactly where it belonged.